Well, folks, 2020 has been a year that will live in infamy, to paraphrase FDR. The coronavirus and the Trump administration's grossly incompetent handling of the biggest public health crisis in over a century has left us with surging cases, surging deaths, and has crippled our economy. His poll numbers are tanking, understandably, because his strategy on the virus has been to claim no responsibility, and he has no national strategy. Governor McMaster has doubled down on the Trump non-strategy and has now pushed for the opening of schools with no plan to keep our children safe or our teachers safe. McMaster is also handing $32 million in CARES discretionary funds to private school scholarships. In South Carolina, that should be considered non-germane to the coronavirus crisis. Rather than supporting local school districts in their coronavirus efforts, 60% of the money, of the discretionary money, goes to a pet project. Most troubling is the continued lack of respect for expertise in the fields of public health, education, national intelligence, and even defense. As we say in the South, we've got a bunch of jackleg amateurs running the most critical institutions of government right now. With the coronavirus, we see a more disciplined response from private business and individuals than from our own government. On top of the coronavirus, recent events have exposed again the glaring systemic bias and overt racism in our country. To name but a few, the false police report against Christian Cooper for birding while black and for daring to ask a white woman to put her dog on a leash. The murder of Ahmaud Arbery, jogging while black. The killing of black EMT Breonna Taylor by police in a no-knock raid at the wrong address. She was home sleeping while black, and her partner was exercising his Second Amendment rights to defend his home. And of course, the murder of George Floyd by police with a literal knee to the neck. 45 has now unleashed police state action in Portland and Chicago, with nary a word from conservative groups who have warned for years against jackbooted thugs of the federal government. You just gotta get that graffiti under control. And in our own county, the Seneca Journal published a racist cartoon on June 10th, just 2 days after alumni of the SHS Seneca High School class of 2018 led a peaceful rally and forum supporting racial justice in our community. We are fortunate tonight to hear from 3 of the panelists from that forum to see what we can do peacefully in our own county. Folks, November 3rd is just 101 days away. We're going to work. We're going to mobilize. We're going to register voters and get out the vote. That's the purpose. We will heal our state and country. We will restore hope. We will build back our democratic institutions with victory at the polls. How do I know this? Right here in Oconee County, the reddest county and the reddest state, in this COVID environment, we had enthusiastic support for this fundraiser. And I think I came out of industry, so I'm going to use some terms here. This is a leading indicator of voter enthusiasm in November. We're going to see record-breaking turnout amongst Democrats and independents and people who share our values. We want to support and elect candidates who share those values. We are seeing black, brown, and white people come together in our community to work for justice. We are fighting to prevent suppression of the vote. Our #1 constitutional right is that right to vote. We are simply not settling anymore. Tonight, you're going to hear from a tremendous lineup of speakers who will define their vision for Oconee, for South Carolina, and for our great nation. Tonight, our keynote speaker is the epitome of the American success story. JHarrison is the man who will send Lindsay back back home to Seneca. The son of a teenage mother, he was raised by his grandparents in Orangeburg, South Carolina, where he overcame the challenge of grinding poverty with the help of teachers and other mentors who believed in him. With Jaime, character always matters. Hard work is in his bones, and making good on his debt of gratitude for South Carolina is a lifelong commitment. Remembering the people of South Carolina by our representatives is something that's pretty rare today. So we're glad to see this. From a mobile home to Yale and Georgetown Law, he never forgot where he came from. Jaime is putting together a coalition of Democrats, independents, and Republicans who are tired of the flip-flopper Lindsey Graham, who, as Jaime says, has done nothing but divide the people and go back on his word when it benefits him politically. If going on Sunday talk shows would help South Carolina, we'd be in great shape, but it takes a little more than that in government. If Lindsey has done anything lately to benefit real South Carolina people or its economy, I can't remember it. In fact, the retired president of Michelin North America has endorsed JHarrison and pulled his support from Lindsey. That's one of the largest employers in this state, so that speaks volumes. He said he knew the kind of work that Jaime has done and knew he could take that work ethic and work for the people of South Carolina and Washington. Jaime represents the promise of South Carolina and will work for the people, building a new South together. Now let's hear from the next senator from South Carolina, JHarrison.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. It's so good seeing you, and just a hello here from Columbia to all of the Democrats in Oconee County. We really, really appreciate all the hard work that you all have put in into really making this campaign season a big success. Also want to say hello to my good friend, the chair of our party, Trav Robertson, who is also on, as I can see him. Trav has just done a fantastic job as chair of this great party, of really pulling us all together, investing in our infrastructure, and putting us in a position where we can really contrast ourselves and our values with that of the other side. And so I'm so appreciative of Trav, and he's one of my dearest friends in the state. And there's nobody who has a bigger heart, who fights as much for the least of these than Trav Robertson. So, Madam Chair, again, thank you for having me. I wish we could all be there in person. You know, one of the hard things of dealing with right now with the coronavirus, you know, the thing that I look forward to, you know, you're running for the United States Senate, is going all over South Carolina, eating barbecue, fried fish, getting some pound cake at some of these churches. You know, my waistline is happy that I'm not doing that. But that type of spirit and camaraderie and family is really important. There's nothing better than getting an opportunity to be face-to-face with folks, hearing about the things that they're going through, what their families are going through, the hardships, but also hearing what their aspirations and their dreams are. Again, thank you all for this opportunity. Listen, I am JHarrison, and I'm running for the U.S. Senate here in South Carolina. And as the chairwoman mentioned, I grew up in Orangeburg, South Carolina. I was the son of a teen mom. My mom was 16 years old when she had me. She dropped out of school, and we stayed with my grandparents. And I stayed with my grandparents for most of my childhood. My grandmother had an 8th grade education. She quit school to pick cotton, and then she worked in the textile industry. My grandfather had a 4th grade education. He quit school and worked at a dairy, and then did construction most of his life until he became diabetic and was forced from work. You know, they didn't have a whole lot of money. They didn't have much education, but they were rich. They were rich in terms of their values. And they taught me the value of helping other people when I could, but also the value of working hard. And those are the values that still live with me today. And that's what pushes me to do better and to be better. I was the first in my family to go to college. I went to Yale University, came back here, taught at my alma mater at Orangeburg Wilkinson. And then I left to go to Washington, D.C., where I went to help run a nonprofit to help other low-income kids, just like me, first-generation kids, get the opportunity to go to college for a program called College Summit. I did that for a few years and started law school at Georgetown. And then while I was at Georgetown, I got a call from Congressman Clyburn, and he wanted me to come and join his staff. I did, and I did a great work for the state of South Carolina working in that office. While I was there, I became the executive director of the House Democrats, and then I ran the whip operation for Mr. Clyburn and the Democrats for a few years. We did a lot of good during that time. We passed, the last time that the minimum wage was increased was when we ran that whip operation. We passed the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. We passed the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd hate crimes bill, legislation that to this day still is on the books and is protecting folks. And so I'm very proud of the work that we were able to do. I then met my wonderful wife, did some work in the private sector, and then we moved down here to South Carolina when I became the chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party. You know, when I think back on my life, I know how fortunate and blessed I am. And my life is emblematic that the American dream is still alive, it's still working. And I want to make sure that all of the kids, just like me, little round-headed boys and girls growing up all across South Carolina, get the opportunity to live their dreams. And we all have hopes and aspirations for what our life can be like. And so, listen, here in South Carolina, we have a lot of issues. There's so many issues, and they've only been exacerbated by the coronavirus. In the state, healthcare is a huge issue. Many of our rural hospitals are closing. Almost 300,000 people in the state don't have healthcare. You know, just a few years ago, 14 of our 46 counties had no OBGYNs. We can do better in the healthcare space, but we need the right type of leadership. In education, we heard just recently 17,000 of our kids hadn't contacted their schools since March. And that's because many of them, 38% of our rural communities have no access to the internet. Many of our folks live in internet deserts. How do we expect our kids to compete with the rest of the world when they can't even connect with the rest of the world? We have environmental justice issues, environment issues. We have criminal justice issues. There's so much that we need to work on here in South Carolina, but in order to work on those issues, we got to have the right type of leadership. Lindsey Graham is not it. This is a man who does not work for South Carolina. He works for himself. He is more attuned to getting his tea times with the president or going on Fox News with Sean Hannity. As Congressman Clyburn once told me about people on the Hill, he said they're on the Capitol Hill, they're workhorses and they're show horses. It's time that South Carolina has a workhorse in the Capitol. And I'm going to bring that type of mentality to Washington, D.C., because I won't forget the people here in South Carolina. You know, I'm going to close this off with, and I know we're going to have some questions. But this is a race about hope and bringing hope back here to South Carolina. I'm going to tell you my story of hope, and then I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have. You know, as I told you, I ran the whip operation for Mr. Clyburn. When I was in Washington, D.C., I had an office on the 3rd floor of the U.S. Capitol. On one side, I shared a wall with John Kerry. On the other side, I shared a wall with a legendary icon who we will dearly miss, John Lewis. It was an amazing experience. Well, there's one night I was in my office. It was well past midnight, and it was so late that the custodial staff started showing up. There was a middle-aged African-American woman who was vacuuming, and she was wiping things down. And I saw her, you know, as I sat at my desk typing away. And finally, I looked up because I felt somebody looking at me, and there she was in the doorway. And I told her, I said, ma'am, I said, if you need to come in, you come in. You're my boss. I'll leave. I'll go to the hallway. And she chuckled. She said, you know, son, I come and clean your office every night. You got a really nice office. I said, thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it. She said, now, are you from South Carolina? I said, yes, ma'am, I am from South Carolina. She said, are you from Orangeburg? I said, yes, I am from Orangeburg. She then walked over to my wall where I had pictures, and she picked up one. She said, I love looking at your pictures. Is this a picture of your family? I said, yes, ma'am, it is. She said, now, is this your mother? I said, yes, that's my mom. Is your mom's name Patricia? I said, yes, ma'am, my mom's name is Patricia. Patricia Harrison? Yes, that's my mom. And she stopped. She stood in the middle of the room and she started shaking. She put her hand up to her mouth. She said, oh my God, I know your mom. I went to high school with your mom. I remember when your mom became pregnant and had to stop school in order to have you. And tears started flowing from her face. And she came up and she hugged me. And she said, I would have never thought that Patricia Harrison's son would be right here. You give me hope. And my friends, that is what this election's all about. It is not about me. It's not about Lindsey Graham. It's not about Donald Trump or Joe Biden. It's about the millions of people across this country, the thousands of people here in South Carolina who wake up each and every day and they turn on their TV, they turn on their radio, they open up the newspaper, and all they hear is hatred, bigotry, and discrimination. My friends, those people are hungry for some hope. Our motto here in South Carolina is, while I breathe, I hope. We are a party of hope, but we have to act. We have to work to give people hope again. You know, Dr. King in his letter from a Birmingham jail said, we will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the hateful words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people. It is time for the good people in this state. It's time for the good people in this country to stand up and say, enough is enough. Enough is enough with the hate. Enough is enough with the discrimination. We can do better and we can be better, but we have to act that way in order to get there. And so with our state motto, it says, while I breathe, I hope. I know how powerful hope has been in my life. I know how powerful hope has been in order to change the lives of other folks. But we got to take another step, because what I read in the good book is that faith without works is dead. Well, we also understand that hope, in order to have hope, we have to have action. So my amendment that I want to do to our state motto is, while I breathe, I hope. But while I breathe, I hope. And in order to get that hope, I vote. That's going to be the key for all of us this season. So I want to thank you all for the support. Thank you for all that you have done for our campaign. We are well on our way to making history in this race. They said that we couldn't do it, and we're going to prove to them that we can. Just this past quarter, we raised $14 million in 3 months, more than any person in the history of South Carolina. We raised more money than anybody other than Amy McGrath in the Senate race last quarter. And so I'm proud of what we've been able to do at $31 a person. So thank you all for the support. Thank you for the prayers. Thank you for the financial support. We're going to change South Carolina. We're going to establish this new South that is bold, that is inclusive and diverse. So Madam Chair, I turn it back to you, but thank you for your support. And I can't wait to actually step foot in Oconee County. We're going to, even before, I know the coronavirus is still with us, but we're going to find a way to get up there before this election. So thank you again. And I appreciate the support and all that you all are doing for me and Democrats across the state.
I wish you could hear our collective applause from over 200 people, Jaime. It's wonderful, and you represent our hope. We've got a few questions that were submitted to us, and I'd like to go ahead and ask you those now for as much as you have time for.
Okay.
We've got several other engagements, but first one is, South Carolina is a conservative state. How can you persuade and motivate moderate Republicans to vote for you?
Well, thank you for that, Madam Chair. Listen, you know, for me, I started off this election by saying this, and I believe it to the core of who I am. This race is not about Democrat versus Republican or progressive versus conservative. It's about doing what's right versus what's wrong. And there's been a lot of wrong that has been done in this state for a very, very long time. And it's time to have some leadership that is going to stand up on the side of right. When you think about many of the issues that we are dealing with, they aren't Democratic issues or Republican issues, they're just human issues. How are we going to address these issues? Right now, we have schools falling apart. As I mentioned earlier, 38% of the communities in South Carolina don't have access to internet. Those things are just fundamentally wrong. So what are we going to do about it in order to fix that? We need the right type of leadership. I also talk about the environmental justice issues that we have in this state. There are 40 communities right now in South Carolina where the lead level is higher than the federal standards. And in those communities, Black folks and white folks, Latino folks, Native American folks, Asian folks, Democrats and Republicans, they all live in these communities and they're all drinking that water. They're all bathing in that water. They're all cleaning in that water. Those are fundamental right versus wrong issues. And if we get caught up in the Washington, D.C. political games that Lindsey Graham likes to play, because you've seen his TV ads, it's like, oh, Jaime likes somebody, he said something nice about somebody. That must mean he's a bad guy. Well, you know what? That's what we teach our kids to do. To have manners, to treat people with respect, to treat people the way that we want people to treat us. It's the right thing to do. I'm not going to demonize anybody if they're not worthy of demonization. And so I'm not going to call them out of their names unless they deserve that too. And so it's about just doing the fundamental right thing to do. And I hope that is attractive to folks, regardless if they're Democrat or Republican. And in the end of the day, they will see that I want to represent them. Lindsey Graham wants to be famous. Lindsey Graham just wants to be on TV. He doesn't care about all these issues that people are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. We need workhorses, not show horses.
Thank you, Jaime. And I'll just say, here in Oconee, you folks listening tonight, if you know of moderate Republicans or Republicans who are fed up with Lindsey Graham and are interested in knowing more about JHarrison, if you'll give me their name and contact number, their names and contact numbers, we will get that to the campaign. So we got it. That's part of the work that we can do, is try to bring those moderate Republicans into the Jaime fold. So now, your campaign has attracted national attention. How can Oconee County Democrats help you most to getting our neighbors to vote for you? And I already mentioned one thing, but you can recap your opinion on that.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Jody. One of the first things that you can do, you can go to JHarrison.com and sign up to volunteer. We need more volunteers out there making phone calls, texting, getting in contact with folks. Also, if you got family members or people that you are very close with and you know that they are not registered to vote, let's make sure that folks get registered to vote. That is so crucial in this election and in this election cycle. And so those are some easy ways that you can, even you can spend an hour on your couch. You don't even have to go out into the heat, and you can help this campaign make a difference. This weekend, we have over 1,700 people across the state of South Carolina that are signing up to volunteer, because tomorrow we will be officially 100 days out from this election. And so we need you. We need your support. We need you to help get the word out. There's still a lot of people in the state who don't know who I am. And in order to change that, we need you all to be ambassadors for this campaign, to inform them of who we are, what we believe, and what we're fighting for, which are to improve the lives of every South Carolinian. Because in the end of the day, Jody, when I get up to Washington, D.C., and I take that oath of office, I'm going to be representing everybody in this state, not just Democrats, not just the people who voted for me, every single person. And I'm going to take that responsibility very, very, it's going to be near and dear to my heart. And it's going to be extremely important to make sure that I do all that I can to represent every single person in this state.
Thank you so much. You heard that, folks, and that's what our party's going to be about starting tomorrow. And I'll be working on one of those text banks or phone banks. Okay, number 3, when elected, what committees would you like to serve on to address the issues of South Carolina?
So the committee that I would like to be placed on is the Appropriations Committee. And the Appropriations Committee is, in essence, the money committee. That is where the money is dispersed in the federal budget to the various sectors of our society. And that's really important. And it touches on every single issue, from healthcare to the military, defense spending to the environment and environmental issues. Every aspect of our government and our society is touched by the Appropriations Committee. And I want to serve on that committee so I can make sure that South Carolina, and particularly some of our underserved communities, are getting the resources that they need in order to make sure that folks can live and enjoy the American dream.
Okay. Oconnie's fastest growing segment is retirees. How will you address their concerns for Medicare, Social Security, and COVID-19?
Well, another great question, Jody. You know, seniors are near and dear to my life. When you're raised by your grandparents, you learn very early on about many of the issues that seniors go through, and many of the difficulties and barriers that they have. You know, my grandparents didn't have 401ks, they didn't have pensions, they worked hard all of their lives, but they just didn't have that. So they had to basically, Social Security and Medicare was how they existed. It was that safety net that allowed them to have a standard of living. When my grandfather passed away, I learned a lot of things about our system that I didn't know. I thought, and my grandma also thought, that when one of you, if you know, you don't have any retirement other than the Social Security system, but when one of your spouses passes away, we thought that, you know, the other spouse would get both Social Security checks. Well, that's not the case. You get a death benefit, and then you get the larger of the 2 Social Security checks. But that doesn't mean that your standard of living, that the things, your bills change at all. And so my grandma was faced with, well, how do I pay your grandfather's part of the mortgage? How do I pay, you know, the light bill and take care of utilities and all these things when we have half of the revenue, the half of the money coming into the house every month? There are real challenges that our seniors face right now. And when I go to Washington, D.C., the senior community is going to have a champion on their side with me, because I understand how these issues impact our seniors. You know, some members of the Republican Party early on in COVID, I think the Lieutenant Governor of Texas said this, that we just needed to open up back up the economy and open back up the government, and many seniors would be willing to give up their lives in order to do it. And I was furious, absolutely furious, because no, my grandma and all of the seniors that I love so dearly are not worth, you know, not one life is worth us throwing it away. We can find ways in order to protect folks, at the same time open back up in a safe and productive manner. One of the ways we can easily do it is to make sure everybody's wearing a mask. If we had, and you mentioned this early on, Jody, if we had had a national standard for how we were going to address this coronavirus, we would not be in this situation we're in right now. It is because of feckless leadership on all levels. And we really need some people with a backbone and a spine, some vision about how we move forward. And I want our seniors to understand that you're going to have someone who's going to champion your issues when I go to Washington, D.C.
Okay, thank you, and that's critical. when I grew up in Oconee County, we had 50,000 people, and I think the population of Oconee is 78,000 now. And most of that growth is in retirement communities. So that alone is a very important message to get out to our voters here in Oconee. All right, Oconee County is one of the most beautiful parts of the U.S. What are the most important issues of climate change?
Yeah.
South Carolina.
Well, you're right. Oconee is a beautiful part of the state, but South Carolina in and of itself is a beautiful state. And that's why just recently when the Trump administration announced that they were looking at exploring off of the Eastern Seaboard drilling, I just stood up and said, enough is enough. While Lindsey Graham was quiet as a church mouse. We need somebody with a backbone that will stand up to any administration, regardless if it's Democratic, Republican, or what have you. We can't allow drilling off of the coast of South Carolina. We can't allow it because one of the impact that it will have on our economy. Think about if we have an oil spill off of Myrtle Beach or Charleston or Hilton Head and how that will impact tourism, which is our #1 industry in the state. Then second of all, think about the impact on climate change. We already know that climate change is here. We are seeing these huge category 4 and 5 hurricanes that are coming up every year now. We're seeing 1,000-year floods that are now taking place every other year. We have to do better, and we have to address climate change. We have to address carbon emissions. All of those things are really, really important. And so I'm going to protect the environment because I also understand that I want to leave this world in a better place for my sons and the sons and daughters across this country and in this state. In order to do that, we're going to have to make some hard decisions. But there's some new technologies and new ways to expand opportunities here if we invest in new energies as well. I just met recently with some folks from the solar industry. And they're talking about how they are revitalizing rural communities because in these rural areas where there's tons of land, they're putting a lot of solar technology in those areas to capture energy and then bring new jobs. And so we just need to be creative here. We can't be anchored in the past, and we need to look forward to our future.
All right, thank you. I got one final question. How will you fight to keep South Carolinians safe with the pandemic? How will you support schools and the safe reentry for students and teachers?
Yeah, so, we got a lot of issues, particularly right now in terms of how we're dealing with the coronavirus in the state and nationally. And one of the things that we have to do is let's listen to the healthcare professionals. Let's listen to the scientists. They are telling us that we need to all wear a mask. And we've seen all the charts that we will dramatically reduce the curve if we have a statewide mandate that if you step out of your house and you go into the public place, you wear a mask when you do. That's how you stop the transmission of this virus right now in the short term. We are going to push and invest in terms of a vaccine for the virus. And that's really important, but we don't know when that's going to happen. So we got to do everything that we possibly can. Let's wear a mask. Make sure you're 6 feet from folks and we socially distance. Let's make sure that we're responsible and not pulling together these large gatherings of folks when we know that's the way that this virus is transmitted. Let's make sure that each school has a plan that fits the community that they're in. Let's make sure that the schools have the resources in order to plan for reopening. Just recently what Governor McMaster did in terms of giving $32 million to private schools, when we know that so many of our public schools don't have the resources, they don't have nurses, they don't have the technology. Many of the kids are in these internet deserts. There's so much more that we can do, but we have to have the right type of leadership. And I'm committed to, I hope between now and the election, we actually start doing the right things. But if that is not the case, when I become the next United States Senator here in South Carolina, just know that I will double down on the efforts to make sure that we're moving in the right direction and that we have the resources from the federal government to do more and to do better.
All right, thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Jody.
Yep, I think that's all we got time for today, but we've been really anticipating this moment and really appreciate you. We're going to be working hard for you in Oconee County and welcome you anytime with our
Thank you,
mascot.
everybody. And
Thanks.
stay safe, everyone. Please stay safe.
Thank you. Listen, I don't think there's a better qualified candidate for Senate anywhere, not just in South Carolina. I mean, this young man is the new generation, and he can help bring hope to this country. And I tell you, I, for one, will be working really hard for JHarrison. All right.